This is lecture 4. It is Thursday, January 28th, 2009. I want to begin this lecture by asking you, has there ever been a time in your life where you felt like things were falling apart? Or has there ever been a time in your life, in our society, or your town, or your family, that you felt like the foundations were beginning to crack? These are the exact questions that we're talking about today as we talk about Peter Berger's argument for understanding religion, which draws from Emil Durkheim, with the core concern being, how is it that this social order that we have, social order in terms of the continuity of society and the way groups tend to, social groups hold together, how is it that this order continues over time and seems to continue at such a time span that's longer than our lives, than our individual lives? So you can see we're jumping now, not jumping, actually continuing straight from Durkheim's classic discussion about the way religion is a beliefs and ritual system that keeps order not only in a religious sense, but because religion is so connected with society, helps to keep the order of society, in his language, order of the church, which, as I've said before, is a social group. So, a quick overview of today's lecture. It'll be a little shorter than usual. I'm going to introduce just what does it mean to think about religion in terms of meaning making. Then I'm going to talk about Peter Berger's argument, with the key phrase here being religion as sacred canopy. I'll say more about that. Then finally I'm going to introduce next Tuesday's online discussion, which is Super Bowl focused, and so is therefore a discussion about a super ritual. I have not got around to grading your critical reading assignments yet. I will be working on that. I may not get those get comments back until next week, but that'll be okay because we have one other Emil Durkheim reading next Thursday, so a week from now, and I will integrate some of your comments from the critical reading assignment with that assignment. So, introducing this idea of religion as meaning, as something that helps to prevent crisis. Hold on a second, my phone is going off. I'll turn that off. As I said before, coming from Durkheim, sociologists can understand that one of the key problems, if you will, when we look at a social world, a society, or a group, is how the heck does this group stick together? Durkheim's argument, if you remember, was much about beliefs and rituals helping us to understand the division of the world into the sacred and the profane, and in doing so, helping basically to keep order in the world. And as I mentioned in some of my examples in the last lecture, the sacred and profane, and as Durkheim writes, can be just about anything. So if we think in terms of it as a religion, the sacred and profane would be, for example, those things, the sacred things would be things that are allowed to happen in a church or allowed to happen under the label of religion, and profane things would be those that aren't. Profane is not the same thing as evil, so let's make that really clear. We're talking in a much more kind of abstract sense when we're talking about sacred and profane in Emil Durkheim's terms. And I give you some other examples, like the University of Arizona, a sacred place being Old Main, a sacred activity being football games, maybe a homecoming that we go to in the fall, and the profane being how to keep together as a community outside those times or when we're away from each other. So sacred and profane refers to spaces, times, objects, activities, and things like that. Basically how our lives together are ordered. Now, what's interesting about this system then, or thinking of religion as a system of meaning, is that it's particularly important at crucial times in individual lives or social lives, and it's also particularly important in what we might call times of transition, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about that. But you can think in terms of maybe your own knowledge of religion or experience of religion. So, some of you have mentioned before in your online discussions the importance of rites of passage. So these seem to be key moments in a baby's life or a family's life or a teenager's life when religion has rituals that give a sense of meaning and help somebody transition to a new phase of life. You can think about the inauguration that, again, we had last week, and religion was very prominent in that, as much as for anything is to just kind of be something to help the country through a transition time, to provide a sense of meaning and a sense of message. And you might have talked to people who cried at that inauguration or cried at some other inauguration or ceremony, and that usually being a symbol of kind of this connection of individual and social group through this ability to bring meaning into our lives. So before I get into Peter Berger's argument, which is very much about religion as generating meaning for humans and helping to keep society together, before I get into that, as I started off with my lecture, think again of a moment in your life where you felt disconnected maybe from others, where you felt like meanings that you had before to understand your life or to understand your relationship are no longer useful. Or think about an occasion that you've had where the meaning has been directly challenged by events in your life. So a classic one, especially maybe for some of you in college, is the breakup. And a great way to understand how meaning operates in a situation like that, like a breakup, a romantic breakup, is to see what people say to you or what you say to others. So for example, if you had just gotten dumped by your boyfriend or girlfriend, it's likely that one of your friends or family members will walk up to you and say, well, he or she was just not good enough for you. You know, your relationship wasn't just right and you're going to find somebody better. See, so that's very kind of common, typical. We expect our friends, our family to say things like that. But what if the same friend had walked up to you and said, well, you know what? He or she, actually they were perfect. You stink. And you couldn't make it happen. Or what happens if they walked up to you and said, oh, love is just a sham. I wouldn't even think about finding a relationship for the rest of your life. Just forget about it. Now, some people do engage with those sorts of meanings or interpretations of a situation, but for the most part, I would guess that most people would kind of be shocked or appalled or kind of unsettled if a friend had said that to you after a breakup. And that's evidence that there are certain dominant interpretations and meanings of life that are more legitimate than others, that basically are the ones that we hear in circulation in our social world. And the example, the breakup, is an example of a moment of crisis and how important meaning is to getting us through, us as individuals and us as a society, through moments of crisis. So one of the theorists par excellence, or in other words, very important theorists around this, is Peter Berger. So I'm going to talk a little bit about Berger, whom you read for today, for this Thursday's class. And Berger's main question is, how is it that society exists at all, which is foundational, but even more important is, how is it that society exists over time? How does it keep going? And the kind of the visual example of this is if we think of society, let's just say, for example, the United States. We'll just pick the United States. We'll say somewhere around 1776, though we know there are historical roots before that, but let's just say that's the official founding of the United States. And we enter somewhere, right about here, we enter, some of you maybe are a little closer in time to where we are now, I'm probably a little further back. But regardless, our lifespans basically are this point forward. What Berger is asking is, how is it that we have been able to kind of drop into the middle of this society? We weren't here at the beginning. We weren't here at all these points along the line, but yet we are members of this society, and we are integrated into it, we're socialized into it. How is it that this social thing can stay alive when all the people at the beginning are dead? They're no longer here. And so his question is really one about continuity. How does society keep going? And he assumes a couple things in thinking about society. First, he assumes that society is vulnerable. Vulnerable. All right, here we go. In other words, that stuff can happen externally, internally, to individuals, whatever. That things can happen